The World Ends With You, the animation, is a spring 2021 anime based on a game of the same name. But before I even tell you if I thought the anime was good, I have a correction from my earlier initial impressions video. Let's talk about the opening theme. If you follow anime news, you probably already know this, but I didn't. Teenage City Riot has been scrubbed from the internet. Around the time of episode 6 airing, I finally found out why the news song from ALI never appeared in the anime. The drummer for ALI was arrested for fraud, so their new song was never officially released anywhere, but it was ripped off a Japanese radio station by fans, so it's out there if you look for it. But ALI, the band, is done. Stupid Japan and their insistence that celebrities not be criminals. This is what I get for not following anime stuff on social media. Oh, also, this video also has some general spoilers, but I won't say specifically what happens or to what characters past the first few episodes. This is far from a spoiler-free review. I have to talk about a few specific aspects to talk about my impressions of the story overall. But as of recording this, I don't think I'm going to even use any visual footage from past episode 7 or so. But anyway, let's get to the actual review. Well, that was a disappointing mess. To explain this opinion, I think I should first restate what I expected from The World Ends With You, the anime, and why I expected that. As I said, this anime came out spring 2021. It was delayed from winter 2021, but both slots still put it right before the release of Neo: The World Ends With You, the next game in the series, releasing in July 2021. So, an anime of the first game is clearly intended to synergize with the game release, both to get people who played the original game more excited for a sequel, and to get more people into the story before a sequel so they buy the game. Even though I'm in the former group and I played the game, I will be at least trying to review the series from the latter perspective. I pre-ordered the game before the anime aired, so I can't really say the anime affected my purchase decision in any way. I think that the anime series is a failure for any potential new fans of the series. If this was your only experience with the series, and you actually think it was well made, please let me know in the comments. The World Ends With You, the original game, had 4 big selling points that the series is remembered for. First, the soundtrack. This, the anime does... okay. I'll say more on that at the end. While I think the existing soundtrack from the game could have been used better than it was, it's still the World Ends With You soundtrack, so 1 of 4 selling points successfully translated. Second, unique combat. I'll talk more about the action scenes in the series later, but the anime did not and could not recreate the touchscreen 2 characters at once pin powers combat of the original game. This selling point was impossible to translate. For what it's worth, a lot of people didn't like the combat in the game either, and the sequel game completely changes things anyway, so there was no reason to even try to replicate this. While on the topic of gameplay mechanics, fashion is completely absent from the anime, and while it was a unique feature of the game, it really didn't matter to the story at all. Same for the minigame Tin Pin Slammer, which was also a game mechanic, and it also doesn't matter to the story in the slightest. Third, the setting. Shibuya is vibrant and unique, and The World Ends With You's art style made it pop out of the screen. The anime also looks very nice, recreating the thick outlines and vibrant colors of the game. So that's 3 out of the 4 points hit or sidestepped. What's wrong with the series? That would be the 4th point, the script. Characters. Why do we care about anyone in this story? Gone are most of the fun, humanizing moments of the story. Shibuya is not a lived-in, vibrant area. It's an empty soundstage and the main characters are just going through the motions of a plot. There's too many things kept in the story that aren't really important overall, but steal away time from the things that are important. Instead of talking about the main cast, let's talk about some of the side characters. 777 and the Reaper Band. These characters show up in all 3 weeks of the story. Yes, 777 and his band are Reapers, but they don't really seem to care about hunting players. Instead, they just want to rock. Each week, one of the days involves Neku doing a side quest for 777, and he's a likable recurring character. But in the anime, his band gets a lot less time to develop, with their best moment, the microphone hunt, being over in a single minute of screen time. That may seem like a complaint, but overall they get a fair shake as far as side characters go. They're at least still in the story, they clearly didn't have time to develop them more, and they at least serve some purpose in expanding the world a bit. They're not great, but they're a pretty good example of translating a character. Unlike the darker-skinned couple. Yes, they have names, Sota and Gao, but to be honest, their major distinguishing feature is their skin tone. I didn't remember their names. Are they tanned? Are they South Asian? Are they Ganguros, a subculture I know nothing about? I really don't know. They're in the game too and are kinda unnecessary, but they serve no purpose in the animation's story. They barely get development despite having a surprising amount of screen time, yet I dare say the anime actually gives them more development than the game. But why do they get so much screen time and even a bit of development? If it's to show Neku beginning to care more about people, I really didn't get that from them. He just talks to them a couple times and they sort of have some exposition. Their key plot role in the game was winning Tinpin Slammer to clear a mission when Neku can't. And yeah, Tinpin Slammer's not even in the animation, leaving them as just another pair of players without really any chemistry or plot relevance. In the first week you have Beat and Rhyme, and they're important characters that have chemistry. Sota and Gao in the second week seem like they're also trying to be an imitation of that and don't do anything. You could have instead shown more scenes of Joshua harassing Neku, or about some more about what Minamoto was doing behind the scenes, as he's a fan-favorite character and it's kind of important to the overall plot what he's been doing. Frankly, I think they should have just cut these characters out entirely. We already see from 777 that they don't really have time to properly show side characters, and I somehow doubt these two were fan favorites. There was really no reason to even keep them around. So how about those main characters? Well, I actually don't have a lot to say about the main characters. I could do rundowns of personalities and arcs, but if you've played the game or you're going to watch the anime, it's not going to be particularly hard to understand them. The anime does communicate their important scenes clearly enough. I just think that the story is such a mess for other reasons that you don't end up caring about their important scenes. So speaking of that mess, let's get on to the story. Story. What's the value of an interesting shell if it's not wrapping an interesting core? The story presentation of the anime is laughably rushed, and the result is a very blunt plot and incredibly one-note characters. If I did not already know the story, I don't think I would even care about why anything was happening. The game is not exactly subtle in its messages, but wrapping that in a package of gameplay and written dialogue resonated much better for me than the anime's presentation. And as frustrating as certain fights or as tedious as a couple of side quests could be in the game, having these breaks between plot greatly enhanced the story's pacing and presentation. Instead, in the anime, game mechanics are pulled out whenever plot necessary without really any explanation, and characters just show up, say a couple lines, and that could be all they get for full episodes. The issue is, The World Ends With You does not work as a direct adaptation. Many elements related to gameplay have no reason to exist as part of the story without gameplay. When can Neku and his partner use pair-up attacks? Well, whenever they feel like it, I guess. They learn to work together in only a few minutes of screen time because the plot needs them to. Despite so many mechanics from the games being cut, there's still so many there for no particular reason. The actual message of the story is still interesting. There are even good episodes. Most episodes that are not the start of a week or an end boss are pretty good. Episode 1 sucked. Episode 2 changed my opinion and gave me hope that the series would be good. But then, at the end of every Reaper's game, the story just becomes a big, overblown combat scene and rushed plot moments with little time for reflection. The game does not have a huge amount of scenes of mental recovery or introspection either, but you have a lot of gameplay to give you that time. And the scenes that do have it are allowed to breathe because they don't have to fit into 22-minute time slots. One good thing about the story. A few episodes worked out pretty well. As I said, episode 2 is good. They switched around the order of a couple plot points to give episode 2 room to breathe. Episodes 5 and 6 are pretty okay. And most surprisingly, the final episode actually works pretty darn well. If you didn't know the story already, it probably still comes off as a huge mess. But would you believe it's an even bigger mess in the game? There's a problem that the game has. Some of the important info in the final episode is only found in New Game Plus bonus missions, and the final shot of the anime is from an extra cutscene after a bonus boss. This was the worst aspect of the game, and while I wouldn't say the anime did it well, it actually did handle it better. That's a pretty low bar, but there are at least some things to praise about the adaptation, I guess. Fights. Let's really talk about the fights now. In the game, bosses and even some normal enemies require engaging with team mechanics to defeat. For example, the giant bat in the first week requires Neku and Shiki to complete different tasks to fight it. Taboo Noise requires simultaneous attacks from both partners to erase. Minaminoto cannot be directly attacked by Neku. He teleports away if you try to target him. So you have to either aim near him with pins that don't directly target him or engage him with partner attacks first. The anime takes a lot of these mechanics away, but then adds to some fights for no reason. Not all of this is necessarily bad, but it doesn't add anything to the story. Why does the shark that kills Rhyme have a bunch of fish noise that it eats? It seems like a boss fight mechanic, but that wasn't in the game. Why do the red skull pins summon death lasers from the sky? Did they need an excuse to show a lot of other players being killed off? They take the time to add all this stuff and they never bother to explain pair-up attacks at all? In the anime, Neku and his partner glow blue and destroy stuff when the plot says they need to. But I said before the anime couldn't replicate the combat anyway. The issue is that the combat in the anime is all style and no substance. There's just flashy, quick cuts and Neku using tons of powers that have no introduction whatsoever. Beyond saying that pins exist, there's no explanation. They're just there and Neku has whatever he needs. Good luck trying to find a shred of tactics or even interesting fight choreography. It's just bright flashing colors with alarmingly low narrative tension. But some characters die, you might say. Yes, but not during fights. It feels like there's cutscenes before and after fights where the actual plot happens, and then the fights take place in their own world and don't really begin until everyone strikes battle-ready poses. You know, like a video game. I want to say that I like the animation of The World Ends With You, the animation. It's expressive and distinct, and while there's not many cool things using 3D like long tracking shots, the visuals are still a highlight of the anime. Unfortunately, as I explained at the start, I don't think that looking nice was really a big goal of the anime. It's good to have more CG shows that aren't complete hot garbage, but the goalpost that this anime clearly missed was the story. There's flashes of a good story. Again, I would go so far as to say there were some good episodes, but there were just also episodes that were train wrecks. Gameplay gives certain structure to the story. Early fights introduced game mechanics and abilities of Neku's partners, and many day-to-day missions also introduce various mechanics while you roam the city. The anime just has the plot. But before I focus too much on the game experience, here's Z-Note, an up-and-coming anime reviewer, to give his perspective after watching the series without ever touching the game.
I went into The World Ends With You, the animation, with a relatively clean slate, having never played the original game and only knowing Neku from screenshots of Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. While I liked its stylized aesthetic and the music for the most part was fine, the beginning of the show threw many details and characters out there rather quickly. Several aspects of the combat were left almost entirely unexplained. Even by the time the series was over, I had no idea why certain characters had the powers that they did, how they seemingly got other powers later on, and what ultimately triggers the team attacks. The series felt on some level like it was blasting through on autopilot, that I was supposed to have some back catalog of knowledge about the original game in order to understand why certain things were happening the way they were. With any fantasy universe, there are some aspects that you have to accept or suspend your disbelief for. But for someone completely unfamiliar with the original game, it was asking me to take too many leaps and skipped explanations at the expense of getting through the plot as quickly as possible. It clearly wanted Shibuya and its characters to mean something, but everything lacked the punch that they were striving for. Does the anime compel me to buy the original The World Ends With You, or to give its sequel a try? Honestly, I can't really say that. Any compulsion I have to play the game has more to do with RPGs being my favorite genre than whatever the anime gave me. I do imagine that the experience of having played the game will make some of the show's just go with it storytelling more acceptable, but as a draw for a potential new fan, it just couldn't do that.
Thank you for your feedback, Z-Note. Now to close out my review, the soundtrack. This is kind of going at the end of the review instead of part of the rest of it, because I was waiting for the official soundtrack to come out, about a week after the final anime episode aired. While I could obviously hear the music in the anime, I wanted the full package. I wanted to listen to the tracks by themselves. Unfortunately for me, the full soundtrack is out as of writing this, but not on music streaming services. You just have to buy the album by itself, and I don't really want to. But at least I know what the names of all the tracks are now. I think the best new tracks are Shibuya Vision, Disconnect Me, and the song that plays during the bat fight. I know I said I have the titles, but I'm actually really not sure what the title of that one is. The anime's new mix of It's So Wonderful is also quite good. I kind of expected more existing songs to be used in the show. You're appealing to a specific audience, and that audience either loves, or probably would love, the soundtrack of the game. Yet there's a lot of less interesting, big dramatic music that doesn't really give the show any real identity. It feels like the soundtrack has filler tracks that could have been from any anime. Some characters had music that was already heavily associated with them from the game. How did Mina Minoto never have Transformation playing for his fight? One issue the anime would have had with using more vocal songs is actual dialogue. The game could have vocals everywhere because it had almost no spoken dialogue to interrupt. It's much harder to have lyrics in the background of anything that has voice acting. But there were songs with lyrics and fights, and they did use a couple existing songs from the game, like the aforementioned It's So Wonderful. Aside from a couple fights, it's not like they had a huge amount of new music that they really wanted to show off. The anime soundtrack is just a soundtrack. It's replacing a lot of things that they already kind of had with sort of worse versions of it. The soundtrack doesn't really dominate any of the scenes, and a lot of people would say that's what a soundtrack is for, but brash in-your-face music is kind of the World Ends With You's style. On the topic of brash in-your-face music, I think I like the soundtrack for the anime a bit more for not having the ALI song as the OP. Riot would have been much better as an insert song, like it would have been in Episode 1, to accentuate some fight. I don't even like Twister, the song that became the OP, all that much. It's just so much more iconic for the series that it feels wrong for it to not have been the opening theme. Riot actually sounds a lot more like the featured music in trailers for Neo: The World Ends With You, so maybe it was intended to prime audiences for the faster, more aggressive soundtrack of the sequel. Except that the demo for the sequel game is also out, and has been data mined for all its music tracks. And while they're promoting some of the heaviest, most aggressive music in trailers, it has just as diverse a soundtrack as the original game. So it's the anime soundtrack that has a lot of the more aggressive songs without anything else, which is kind of a downside because I really miss the electronic beats of songs like Calling and Long Dream, and of course hip-hop of Twister and Game Over. So what I'm saying here is really the anime doesn't exactly sound like the games. Let's get back onto an actual topic here. The ending theme, Carpe Diem, was pretty okay. I don't have much to say about it as an ending theme, but as a song by itself, it's a pretty good song. I just keep coming back to that the anime soundtrack is okay on its own, and I think a lot of people like the anime soundtrack, but just directly compared to the Neo World Ends With You soundtrack, it's just blown out of the water. Neo, again, has that funk that I really like. Listen to this little bit of a background track from Neo. And even the more aggressive songs from it still have a bit of a funky beat in them.
Just let me go inside the storm. Life is like a box of chocolates, chasing after another, you can't get enough of it.
I hope I'm getting across what I'm trying to say about the soundtrack enough. I don't really review music, it's generally the hardest part of my reviews to write. Let's get to these last points on my list. The English dub. There's been nothing announced yet about the English dub of the series. As I said in my earlier video, I want to hear this dub because I played the game with English voices. I want to hear Mina Minoto shouting math terms in English.
You're out of your vector. So Zeta slow. You Zeta sons of digits.
So far, I have no idea when, if ever, that will happen. Well, I'll get my beautiful math boy in about a month in the next game, even if it's entirely unclear how he gets into the next game. Maybe the A New Day epilogue is actually still mostly canon, sort of, I don't know. And speaking of epilogues and other weird stuff, I can't predict what will happen in the anime next, as that's all there is to the story, but I can predict what will happen in Neo: The World Ends With You, the sequel game. If I make a review of that game, I'll see if any of these were correct. Prediction 1. At least 5 new mixes with Twister in them. One's already confirmed as of writing this, and I expect more. This is my safest prediction. Twister is just the song of The World Ends With You. Prediction 2. No Tin Pin Slammer. The anime already cut it out, and the game is a sequel to specifically the anime. There may be some other weird side quest game somewhere, but it won't be Tin Pin Slammer. Prediction 3. No Coco. Live-chan wasn't in the anime, A New Day isn't canon. The cutest little Reaper will be nowhere to be seen. Prediction 4. Now here's a real wild prediction. Minamoto is actually a time-traveling older version of Neku. Do I have any evidence to support this? Of course not. But that's the kind of weird BS the story could have. I mean, this is a game by Square. They're pretty good at having first games in a series that are already pretty confusing and then only become way more complicated with sequels. Prediction 5. A New Day is still mostly canon. This directly contradicts my No Coco prediction, but without A New Day, I'm really not sure how we get from the events of the anime into having Minamoto as a main character in the sequel game. Whatever, I'm sure it'll be answered eventually. And so that's my review. I found The World Ends With You, the animation, to overall be pretty disappointing. But it could have been a lot worse, I guess. Giving it any higher than a 6 out of 10 seems excessive, but ultimately I still watched all of it. Most things that I'd rate any lower than that I probably would have dropped pretty much immediately, right? In the end, I'm not going to give it an actual numerical rating here, I don't know. Did you like this series more than I did? Let me know. Want my opinions on more series? Go follow Zenote instead, he gets videos done way faster than me. I have 3 videos lined up right now and it'll probably take 3 months to get them all out. But if you really like specifically my slow opinions, like and subscribe and all that stuff. See ya.